It's not unusual to be loved by anyone.
Oh, and stick around. I got some tickets to give away for the fight as well.
To have fun with
Space
anyone.
Exploration Technology successfully tested its emergency escape system this week. There's so much in the news related to the space industry, and now that we, the Rio Grande Valley, belong to that race, thanks to Elon Musk and SpaceX, will be soon launching rockets from Boca Chica Beach. Let's get an update from a friend. That is Dr. Tom Jones, the Tom Jones, joining us on 710 KURV, NASA astronaut. Dr. T, welcome back to the show. So I'm guessing you were following the SpaceX test yesterday. It looked like a rather simple test. So I understand NASA requires SpaceX to have an emergency escape system on its capsule. So we are ready to go then, right? We're ready for sending people to the International Space Station here from Brownsville?
Well, we're getting closer to getting Americans flying from America again up to the International Space Station. That was a big test yesterday. I watched it in the morning, and it was a very brief test, but it was designed to test the escape system aboard this Dragon capsule that Musk and SpaceX are hoping will be one of the two transports to the space station in a couple of years.
What scenario do you see the emergency escape system being used in? Would it be on the launch pad, or could it be used once the rocket takes off, something goes wrong, and it could disconnect from the booster?
It's designed for the whole envelope from launch all the way up into the end of powered flight, so about eight or so minutes into the flight. And SpaceX has one more test to do. Next year they'll launch off Vandenberg Air Force Base on the West Coast with a Falcon 9 rocket, and they'll get to the most intense flight regime where the dynamic pressure, the combination of speed and thickness of the atmosphere is the greatest. And then they'll separate the capsule with the abort system at that point to see if it can overcome those aerodynamic forces and get the crew, the mock-up crew, safely away from the rocket. So those two tests will define the performance of the abort system. And it's much, much better than the shuttle's capability, which is what I had to train with.
What is the point of no return? How far high into the atmosphere is that?
Well, for the Dragon you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get up to the end of powered flight, so they're almost in orbit, and this system would still work. The motors are self-contained within the sides of the capsule, so they can jet away from any kind of a booster malfunction. That's the whole idea. Get clear of any explosion, and then the ship's recovery system would then take over and parachute them back into the ocean.
That is terrific. Joining us on 710 KURV, NASA astronaut Dr. Tom Jones, our guest.
Dr. Jones, Tim Sullivan here. The original project that's going to be built on Boca Chica Beach, we're told, is a launch pad and some buildings and the infrastructure that's needed for that. It's large and complex, to be sure, but, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but it's far from a Cape Canaveral. But I'm wondering if one day, as we, launch people into space from our area, will that turn into a full-fledged space port, do you foresee?
Oh, I think it will be a spaceport. It'll start off with commercial satellite launches, and then as the business case or the market for the SpaceX vehicles grows, you might see tourist flights out of South Texas, as well as some of these flights to the space station. I think the space station operation is likely to remain for the astronauts over at Cape Canaveral, just because of the infrastructure, the crew quarters, and so forth. So it wouldn't make sense to duplicate that in South Texas. But it could actually grow to several launch pads, and you might have a frequency of launches from South Texas of 3, 4, 6 per year.
How ironic. We're going to wind up getting a space ferry service from Brownsville before we get a water ferry service between Port Isabel and South Padre Island. It's never happened before here in South Texas. Okay, so the first flights for SpaceX are scheduled in 2017. So where's your money? You think they're going to make that deadline?
I think that you'll see certainly test flights with people aboard. It'll be a combination of NASA people and SpaceX test pilots, probably by the end of 2016 or early 2017. And then within a year after that, they'll start regular operational service. So
that's only a couple of years away, Dr.
Blink
Jones.
and I will be here
been
before
way
you.
too long, and I'm glad to see it's coming.
That is amazing. Okay, let's talk about something else, Dr. T. Jeff Bezos made the news a few days back in West Texas. A private venture. So out there in the desert sands of West Texas, he's launching rockets. He's wanting to elbow his way into the space tourism industry. He was successful, I understand. They were able to launch something, get parachute back down to Earth. How realistic is this race that we might see people plopping down several $1,000s and going up to, I'm guessing it's the International Space Station right now, unless
Mars.
there's plans to build something up there soon.
Well, there are a couple of possibilities. It's going to start off with suborbital travel, where you do a cannonball shot up to the edge of space and come back down. So you'll experience, 4 or 5 Gs of acceleration during the launch, and then you'll go into free fall over the top, as if you're arcing on the top of a roller coaster, and you'll be weightless for about 5 minutes, and then you'll do a recovery. So, the Virgin Galactic, Richard Branson, their approach is a little space plane, Spaceship Two. We had the accident with that last fall, which set them back a good year. Then the Blue Origin test that you're just referring to, that was a ballistic rocket taking off, and their hope is to recover a capsule with parachutes with people aboard from the edge of space, and their booster rocket will then vertically lower itself to a soft landing at the launch pad. So that's another reusable approach that's being taken. And there is another small business jet-style space plane called the Lynx that's also in the race. So all three of these companies, and perhaps others, are going to compete for this $250,000 price point, which is what Branson's calling for, to take a brief trip to the edge of space. Then 10 years from now, probably even less than that, I think Boeing and SpaceX, as we've been discussing, they'll have this capsule that's meant for the space station ferry service, but they'll also be able to employ it for orbital tourism.
There are plenty of people standing in line waiting for an opportunity to get into space. Dr. Tom Jones, NASA astronaut, joining us on 710 KURV. Final question for you, sir. We were talking a few days back, Tim and I, having fun with some of these headlines on future Mars missions and the prospect of these folks. For example, Mars One, that project, that privately funded project that wants to send the first colony to Mars. Why is it, sir, that there's so much talk about these people only being able to survive a few weeks if they make it?
Oh, well, that's the Mars One project, if you will. And they're trying to raise funds to send people on a one-way trip to colonize Mars. Unfortunately, the technology is so challenging that I don't think that's going to be feasible within the next 10 years, as they're talking about. And I believe that they're going to run short of funding long before they can even launch.
Well, let's say they do, but what is it in the atmosphere or in space that prevents them from being there for a long time?
Well, first of all, we don't know how to land on Mars with a vehicle big enough to carry people. We were just barely able to land the 1-ton Curiosity rover on Mars. That's sort of the max weight limit. You need a lot more tons to keep a person alive once you get down to the surface of Mars.
Especially for me. I mean, considering my weight gain of late.
Well, you need a lander that's going to do 25 tons, and we just don't know how to do that yet with the combination of rockets and parachutes. Second thing is we don't know how to build machines that are reliable enough to function for years on end. Now we have 3D printers. We can build spare parts remotely, but still, the likelihood is that the life support system would break down long before the astronauts establish themselves there. So we've got about 25 years of homework to do before we're ready to send humans to Mars.
And radiation in the atmosphere as well coming. I mean, the atmosphere is different on Mars, so
very thin, and yes, you will have to bury the habitat on Mars from the cosmic radiation, and the 6 to 9 months that you'll spend getting to Mars, you'll be exposed to that. So you need heavy shielding for that. So we're going to need more advanced rockets. We're probably going to need sandbags full of asteroid dirt to shield the spacecraft. A lot of things have to come together before this could be possible. It will be done, but not right away.
Dr. T, thank you much. Dr. Tom Jones, NASA astronaut, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us on 710 KURV.